Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in with a content warning before this episode. We will be discussing sunscreen, which in part will include discussing things like skin cancer, death, and we're not going to dwell on that for a really long time, but it does come up in the discussion, and also discussion of systemic racism in medicine and cosmetics. So if you are not in a place to hear about those things, then just go ahead and skip this episode. It's no hard feelings. We'll see you next time. Hi, welcome to Infodumpies. My name's Brianne. My pronouns are she, her. I have ADHD, I'm autistic, and I have to stay covered in a thick layer of grease or else my skin dries out.
Hi, I'm Violet. My pronouns are she, her. I have AuDHD, and I found a rare type of fungus that only grows outside of one specific Taco Bell in Minnesota.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is my dump today.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a dump about one of my favorite things.
What's your dumping about?
Sunscreen.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, so for those who don't know, we live together. I'm already aware of her fascination with the cream of the sun, as they say, cream of sun, as they call it.
Crema del sol.
Crema del sol. I have been given a lot of sunscreen, so many sunscreen facts. I think y'all are in for a treat, because I know there's so much about sunscreen's wild, y'all, and she's good. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so dermatology is one of my special interests. And I don't know that I would call myself like a skincare girly, because I don't really care about fancy skincare brands and stuff. I care more about like I can visually figure out what skin condition this might be and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more on on the medical side than the cosmetic side.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also the cosmetic side too, because I'm going to be doing a whole episode on retinoids.
Oh yeah.
But luxury skincare is a scam, which is something I can get into in a different episode. But I thought I would make my first dermatology related one on my absolute favorite product and the one thing that every skincare routine absolutely should have, or else you're basically lighting your money on fire. Like if you're spending any money on any skin stuff from Sephora and you're not putting sunscreen on every single day, you might as well just light the money on fire because it's not doing anything. But anyway, I love sunscreen. I have a cabinet in my room, my cabinet of sumptuous greases, my
Your cream
various
zone.
my cream zone, my various emollient elixirs. But I am very into sunscreen, so I thought I would talk kind of. This is gonna be a long one because I was like, let me do some of the history of sunscreen, and then I went off on a few tangents here, but that's the point of the show. But anyway, I thought I would go into the history of sunscreen, why American sunscreen kind of fucking sucks, basics about sunscreen if you are sunscreen curious, and some of the sort of systemic racism that goes into sunscreen.
Because of course there is.
Because of course there is, yeah. So sunscreen. The sun has been around, longer than humans have.
It's been around the block a few times. That old sun really gets around.
The sun has been around for at least 100 years.
At least. It depends on which Christian you ask.
That's my first fact. But the earliest accounts we have of human beings applying something to their skin to protect them from the sun was in ancient Egypt, naturally, because those motherfuckers had so much figured out. But it was anywhere from 3100 to 300 BC. The ancient Egyptians would use a combo of different botanical ingredients, but the most important ingredient was rice bran, which very recently was discovered to actually absorb some UV rays. So, cool, yeah. They figured that out. So then we go, yeah?
I was just gonna say, I have to wonder if they actually did like some like early scientific style testing where they were like, let's try these different things on this. Hey Joe, come over here. We're gonna slather some things on your back and see
I
what
wouldn't be
burns you the least.
shocked. I wouldn't be
Yeah,
shocked. They were so advanced in so many different things. I would not be shocked if they were like, let's apply these different things to these people who are going to be out in the sun all day and
yeah,
see who burns the least. Yeah, I would
yeah.
not be shocked. So from 800 to 500 BC, ancient Greeks would use olive oil. Modern
Oh,
testing would discover that olive oil has an approximated SPF of 8. But
huh.
also, something to note, olive oil feeds the fungus that naturally lives on your skin, called malassezia. So, some ancient Greeks had to be suffering from, like, fungal acne, as it's colloquially called.
Oh.
Yeah, no, my skin would be miserable. And
So I
often
guess the
in
lesson is. Oh, sorry. I was just saying. I guess the lesson there is if you're gonna slather yourself up with olive oil, cook yourself right away so that you don't go bad.
yeah, well, no, you'll have a nice umami flavor because that would make me break out ridiculously. Olive oil in some labs when they need to grow malassezia is what they use to feed it to make it grow
Oh,
more. Which
oh
I could
no.
do a whole other episode on all of the different conditions that are caused by an overgrowth of that. But anyway, in many different countries, including Japan and most European countries, they began using skin whitening cosmetics that were lead and mercury based as an attempt to
Oh.
protect themselves from the sun. Which olive oil may have had its
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
yeah, olive oil may have had its issues, but yeah, not applying fucking thermometer juice to your face.
Yeah, I think I think I'd rather go with the olive oil. At least I'm
Yeah,
tasty then, you know,
yeah. At least I'll be nice and crispy.
and glistening.
In 1798, Robert Willen, who is often described as the father of modern dermatology, would give a nickname to the skin condition of skin irritated by light, which he called eczema solaire. Which
That's a
is
cool
another one
fucking
of
name.
I was gonna say it's another one of those things where if you don't know what any of those things are, sounds like a beautiful name. Hello, I'm eczema solaire.
It sounds like a villain in like a final boss at the end of a video game. Like you'll never get
He
away with
must.
this eczema solaire.
Yeah, I think this morning I was saying that if you didn't know what chlorine was, it would be a pretty name too. But
Hell yeah,
anyway,
that's a
but
whole
this is
other
where medicine.
episode.
Yeah, just words like I truly believe Hyundai Sonata. If you didn't know what it was,
This is where we
would be
differ.
would be a beautiful name. Um. Anyway, so this is the point where medicine starts actually recognizing sunburns as like a medical condition, and that's when shit pops off for sunscreen. Shortly thereafter, in 1801, German scientist Johann Wilhelm Ritter discovers UV radiation, and you can see where the connection of skin and sun get red, UV radiation happen with light. Fast forward 19 years, and in 1820, an English doctor named Sir Everard Home first proposed that skin pigmentation helped protect people from the sun. We go forward some more, and in 1889, the Swedish scientist Erik Johan Widmark published a study proving that UV radiation can cause skin erythema. And erythema is a word you're going to hear a lot in this episode, and that is redness. Make skin
Oh,
red.
erythema. Like, why not just say red?
Well, because it's not going to be red on every skin tone.
Oh, that's
You know what I mean?
okay. Yeah, true,
So
true.
it is that irritation, the first signs of you getting cooked in the sun, which the connection of erythema mostly just being seen on white skin is part of the systemic racism
They
that is
got me.
inherent to SPF.
They got
Yes.
me.
So in 1896, German physician Paul Unna first made the association between UV exposure and skin cancer, marking precancerous skin changes like hyperkeratinosis.
And
And hyperkeratinosis,
that is when you got too many
uh,
carrots on your skin. They're coming out, and your eyesight's great.
not quite. They are these spots on the skin that can look kind of dry and flaky, and they are
Mm.
evidence that you have experienced DNA damage from UV radiation, and it is not yet cancerous, but an enormously high percentage of those do become skin cancer later.
Oh no.
So, yes. So that is showing that there is a change in the skin that is precancerous. So, the connection to skin cancer seemed to have encouraged more attempts to come up with sunscreen filters, naturally. And many folks made attempts before this, but we see a rise in attempts in the early 20th century. There were lots of very clumsy attempts that were not, the term is cosmetically elegant, meaning they were yucky, nasty, and no one wanted to put it on their skin because it looked weird and felt bad, probably. Either because they were too thick to be comfortable, or they would physically stain your skin.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's not... Yeah, that seems like a real big downside.
Yeah, and that is one of the issues that's still in place, which I'll get to. One of the issues that's still present for a lot of sunscreen is that some of the filters, it's hard to make them super wearable for all types of people.
Yeah. That's what happened to the Blue Man Group, right?
Yes, early sunscreen turned them blue, but they're
God,
actually 185, and they look incredible.
Oh my god, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a UV ray in like 30 years.
Yeah, they're looking fantastic. In 1935, Eugene Schuler, who would go on to found L'Oreal, develops a tanning oil with the first commercially successful UV filter, benzyl salicylate, and you can still buy products with this filter today. In the 40s, the U.S. government tried to get sunscreens made for soldiers, and they ended up using this red veterinary petroleum. I don't know why it...
bad.
Okay, but it's going somewhere.
It does sound like a Dark Souls item. Or like what's the fucking game that it's from Software? Bloodborne. It sounds like a Bloodborne like tincture or something that cures a special illness.
It's not far off. So the formula mostly did the job, but understandably looked and felt terrible. But in 1944, a pharmacist named Benjamin Green, who was an airman in World War II, added cocoa butter and coconut oil, making it more cosmetically elegant, and beginning the origin of Coppertone as we know it today. Which, if you use Coppertone, it still has that reddish hue, but it's been watered down, and it's because of that red veterinary petroleum. So that was the birth of Coppertone. In 1946, the first commercial sunscreen hit the market, and it was called Glacier Cream, created by the Swiss chemist Franz Grieder. The brand still exists today, though the formula is entirely different. And then in 1962, Grieder, who made the Glacier Cream, would be credited with inventing SPF, and sadly discovering that his Glacier Cream only had an SPF of 2. Less than the fucking olive oil the ancient Greeks used.
Well, it sounds like the name Glacier Cream is somewhat apt, given the sun's effect on our glaciers lately.
Yeah, just it's a nice lotion. So SPF can be defined as the ratio of UV energy needed to produce minimal erythema dose on protected to unprotected skin. We'll get back to this in detail later, but basically, the amount of UV energy necessary to produce the first signs of, irritation from the sun on skin wearing the filter versus skin not wearing the filter. So then in 1978, the FDA began regulating the sunscreen market in the US, which sounds great, but that's also where we run into issues with American sunscreen.
Oh, Lord.
And by the 1990s, most sunscreens had an SPF rating between 15 and 30. Today, we know that some filters like oxybenzone, octinoxate, may contribute to coral bleaching.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so in places like Hawaii, you have to wear, and I'll get into the types of sunscreen later, you have to wear a mineral-based sunscreen to protect the coral when you're going to go be swimming. There are some critiques of the study, it's kind of like, yes, those substances do cause coral bleaching, but also you're putting the onus on the individual a lot when the rising sea temperatures are also doing that and stuff like that. So personally,
surprise, who would have guessed? Big corporations at it again.
There is validity to it. There is validity to it. So, personally for me, I will use something if I'm not going to be going to swim in the ocean that has one of those ingredients. But if I'm going to the ocean, I will stick with strictly mineral sunscreens. But it's not as easy as all that because mineral sunscreens are not super accessible to every skin tone, which I will get into here in a minute. It was also found in a 2019 study that some sunscreen filters are absorbed into the body from the skin, which has caused a lot of fear-mongering and sort of derision of sunscreen in general, where people were trying to make their own homemade sunscreen, which doesn't fucking work.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It doesn't work.
I mean olive oil.
No, it doesn't work. It's not enough.
I have heard of people doing like peanut butter. I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw a video a long, long time ago of like people trying homemade sunscreens, and it was like they all didn't work, except peanut butter sort of kind of worked. I think they had said it was like SPF like 2 or something. So essentially glacier cream, but better flavored.
And I would be horribly in anaphylaxis.
Oh yeah, that too.
You and I both can't wear peanut butter sunscreen.
I think we might be experiencing a little bit of anathema of some kind. Erythema? Anathema?
But it's in my throat, and it's itchy, and it's hard to breathe.
Yeah, I don't know why.
So some of these sunscreen filters were getting absorbed into the skin and found in bloodstreams. They have not said whether or not they were doing any harm by being there, what amounts would be harmful versus the amounts you're absorbing. You know what I mean? Like, just because you found it there doesn't mean it's doing what you think it is. And personally, for me, I know that skin cancer runs in my family and that skin cancer is a risk and that I am protecting myself from future harm. So in the meantime, I'm just going to use a fucking sunscreen I like, and I'm not going to think about it.
Yeah.
I'm full of fucking microplastics anyway. I can't do anything about that. So yeah, that's honestly, where we're at with sunscreen today.
I feel like people that are wanting to try and make their own homemade sunscreen and stuff like that and just get around buying just a basic sunscreen, I feel like they'd be better off just using the money that they would not want to spend and just taping it to their bodies with like a glue stick or something to cover up their skin to protect them from the sun. I would be interested to see what the SPF quality of gluing a dollar bill to your arm would be.
Well, it's also like sunscreen is not the only thing you should use to protect yourself from the sun, too. So these people would actually be better off buying some. They make UPF protective clothing, which has like basically it's SPF clothes.
Oh.
Get a wide brim hat, get a UV visor.
I had just sort of assumed that most clothes were mostly UV blocking. I don't know why I assumed that, I guess. But it kind of makes sense that, like, filtering. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I sort of assumed that, like, black clothes, because they, like, absorb so much heat, would also, like, block more sun, because darker? I think it just makes sense in my head.
So yeah, it filters it, but it's not going to block it. So someone who's working in the sun a lot, it's probably a good investment. Or, like, people who go hiking, it's usually a good investment, too.
That's a good idea.
But anyway, so why does American sunscreen fucking suck? I am such a nerd about sunscreen. I have sunscreen I order from a Korean website because I love it and our filters suck. I like a lot of sunscreens that are not from here because it sounds good to have the FDA regulating sunscreen filters like a drug, but when it's regulated like a drug and it has to go through drug testing stuff to get approved, it really limits what new and improved sunscreen filters we can get approved here in the United States.
Yeah. We should abolish the FDA, get rid of them.
No, that's not... So in other countries, they have more rigorous cosmetic testing stuff, and it gets regulated as cosmetics, so they have all of these beautiful, elegant sunscreen filters that work on all different types of skin tones and are more comfortable to wear and don't burn my eyes.
And smell nicer. In my experience.
Well, that's because I'm picky and I'm buying fragrance-free stuff.
Which I
mean, I love you, and
I will say,
I give you those.
In my own minimal experience, I used to not wear sunscreen on my face every day, but being with a skin freak, as you might say,
I'm the skin freak.
Being with a little skin freak has changed my ways.
Skin freak.
But part of the reason I didn't do that for a long time was because a lot of the sunscreen I would get at the store, like facial sunscreen, because I knew for a long time, like I need to be using a sunscreen when I go out. A lot of it, I didn't like the way it smelled. I didn't like the way it felt. A lot of it was really oily,
Mm-hmm.
and it would leave my skin
Mm-hmm.
feeling super weird. But as soon as this little skin freak comes in here with the fancy Korean sunscreen, that stuff's nice. It just feels nice to put on your
It's so
face.
nice. So nice. So yeah, we're very limited, and we get those oily, greasy, awful ones that
Ugh.
if you sweat in the slightest, it bleeds into
Yeah.
your eyes, and
God.
it's just awful.
Yeah. Or you look like Mark Zuckerberg waterboarding. Or not waterboarding, wakeboarding. I was just thinking of what I wanted to do to him. Wakeboard. I don't know if you've seen that picture of Mark Zuckerberg wakeboarding, but
Hello,
his
hello,
face is completely
humans.
white.
Hello, humans on Facebook. I'm just doing some of my favorite human hobbies that I have. I'm
Such
baking
as,
cookies. I will be waterboarding. I mean,
if you didn't know if you didn't know that waterboarding was a form of torture, and somebody said, "Hey,
it
I'm gonna
sounds
go
cool.
waterboard," you would be like, "Hell yeah, I'm in." Just, just let me put on my sunscreen first. Anyway, this
Yeah, no.
Guantanamo people really,
if you're gonna be
really need to
waterboarding
use it.
people, if you're gonna be waterboarding people in the sun, you need to wear sunscreen.
Exactly. Yeah.
But while regulating sunscreen filters as a drug sounds good on paper, it's really kept us from making a lot of progress here. Like you have to get entirely new over the counter, like an entirely new over the counter drug has to be approved basically
Mm.
to get a new filter. While other countries might not have as rigorous of testing like a drug for sunscreen filters, they still go through a lot of testing to get approved. So we kind of are lacking. And SPF testing in the US is kind of draconian, medieval, if you will. So to get into the SPF more, the sun protection factor of a sunscreen is tested on actual human beings. They are
Mm.
knowingly exposed to a known carcinogen and in deliberately damaging amounts because, like I said, to test SPF, you have to give someone
Oh
the
yeah.
minimal dose of UV radiation in order to elicit minimal erythema to show that
That
you're
is
getting a
true.
burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Huh.
they are exposed to a carcinogen in enough to damage their skin. And it's measured by seeing how long it takes to reach that dose with skin exposed to UVB rays and with and without sunscreen. So the sun produces UVA, UVB, infrared radiation, and visible light. So the easy way, the reductionist, albeit, but easy way to remember is UVA is you feel age. That's the one that chews up your collagen more. It does have some cancer-causing effects, and I'll get into why skin aging is like more than just a cosmetic thing. But it does the stuff that kind of chews up the collagen in your skin, thins it out, and it does have some cancer-causing properties. And that's the one that even on a cloudy day, you're still getting blasted with UVA rays. Even when you're inside,
Got it.
windows only filter UVB. You're still getting blasted with UVA.
Okay.
UVB is you feel burn.
Got it.
UVB is what makes you burn. UVB is also what kicks in the vitamin D production in your body, which, again, sunscreen is not going to keep you from getting the vitamin D you need. It may protect you from UVB, but even if you have darker skin tones, because there's natural protection from UVB to a certain amount, aren't going to convert sunshine to vitamin D as readily either. So UVB does that, but sunscreen is more important. You get vitamin D from other things. Infrared radiation, which is the heat. So if you have rosacea like I do, the infrared radiation can make that flare. And visible light, like blue light, which you are not getting enough to make a huge effect on your skin from your devices, but you are absolutely getting blasted with it from the sun. Each has different effects on your skin. Sunscreen only protects against UVA and UVB if you get a broad spectrum sunscreen. And arguably, some may protect against visible light, like blue light. If you have a sunscreen that is tinted and has iron oxides, there are some cursory tests that say it may help protect from visible light, which if you are prone to hyperpigmentation, like if you have a darker skin tone,
Oh.
especially if you have a darker skin tone and your skin goes through some trauma, generally you are more prone to developing hyperpigmentation. So using a tinted sunscreen that has iron oxides can help protect your skin and help that heal faster and not be as lasting or permanent, which is great.
Cool.
It needs more study, but it honestly won't hurt anything to do that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, people are getting into it saying this protects against blue light from devices, and it's like, that's not doing anything, but the sun absolutely blasting your ass with that.
Yeah. The only thing that I've found blue light to really have an effect on for myself is like with my eyes and like eyesight. I've found that blue light from like computer stuff will affect my eye strain, but not anything. I've never gotten like a sunburn from a computer monitor. That would be wild.
Yeah, and the visible light isn't going to make it burn necessarily, but it affects there is a whole sort of cascade for hyperpigmentation that happens in skin, and visible light sort of exacerbates that. But anyway, I could do hyperpigmentation on a completely different episode and get very excited about it.
Hell yeah.
So there are also issues in the accuracy and replication of SPF testing results. So SPF testing is done in a controlled indoor environment using a solar simulator, which is fundamentally different on the sort of waves in the UV spectrum that the sun has. Testing is done indoors where things like heat and humidity are not accounted for. And like in Texas right now, I get swamp ass going out to go take the dog's pee and coming right back inside. So I'm using waterproof sunscreen because it's going to be melted off in the end of the day. So doing this indoors doesn't account for stuff like that. And then when they test sunscreen for water resistance, like when it says water resistance up to 60 minutes, that sort of thing, that involves submerging the person in a whirlpool and then toweling them off and repeating the exposure to the solar simulator.
Huh, okay. So it seems like some of these tests are a little bit more rigorous than others, but most of them are simply just, it sounds like not quite the right environment to test what they're testing for.
Yeah, and then this is the basic for how all SPF gets tested in the United States.
Well, I think I see the problem.
Yeah, so for SPF testing, sunscreen is applied in amounts of 2 millimeters per centimeter squared, which, I'm American, I don't do metric good, but most folks using sunscreen at home are only applying half of that. So if you're only applying half of that, you are at best getting half of the SPF that's on the label.
Yeah, that is definitely more than I tend to use, and I'm gonna definitely. I keep trying to up it.
I have to phrase this. I was about to say that's why I showed you the 2-finger method, which
yeah, you did. But yeah,
which I'll get into later. But it's basically you, for your face and your neck, you squirt the sunscreen for 2 finger lengths to get that covered.
Yeah, just cursory, like, to me that seems like so much sunscreen, which is frustrating.
Yeah, I like to do mine in layers, but that's a different thing. I'll get into sunscreen application in a little bit because there's some other recommendations. But yeah, when people aren't applying that amount, it can be misleading for the consumer who is definitely not applying enough. Yeah. It also doesn't account for inactive ingredients, even though many are anti-inflammatory and anti-redness. So when the entire test is determined based on when you start getting an inflammatory response in the skin from the UV exposure, if you have inactive ingredients in the carrier for your sunscreen, which is the inactive sort of part of the formula, the lotion part, it could be affecting, like, the skin could still be getting damaged, but you are not seeing it as quickly simply because you have these other ingredients in there.
Oh, well, that's cheating. They're cheating on the tests.
Yeah, so there is no control for which in cosmetics, the vehicle is the lotion, the gel, the cream, the whatever agent that the active ingredients are carried in. So there's no vehicle control in these studies. So there are really popular ingredients like niacinamide, bisbolol, that may minimize the inflammatory response visibly, but that doesn't mean they've minimized the sun damage. It just means you're not seeing it as quickly. And the other issue is the measurement is entirely subjective.
Oh.
Yeah, it depends on the person. who is doing the study to determine whether or not that minimal erythema has been reached.
yeah, that seems good, Frank. She looks pretty red. Like, what?
And you can see where the issue is, because they are not required to do it on different skin tones.
My God. Yeah, like this whole thing sounds very unscientific.
Yeah, it's not required to be done on different skin tones. It's purely subjective. And there is an issue in dermatology as a whole of doctors not having the knowledge and experience to know what things look like on skin tones that are not white, because in most of the books, they're shown on white skin. So they can completely miss, the minimal erythema on a skin tone that is not super white. So the reader and the person being tested influence the response, and they are not super accurate. The other issue is that it is extremely expensive to get SPF tested. It is between $5,000 to $10,000 to do SPF testing on your formula. So this makes it harder for smaller companies to test their SPF, which is especially difficult because the SPF can vary from batch to batch of sunscreen, but companies are only required to be tested once by one lab.
Oh my God. And the testing is $5,000 to $10,000, and it's bad testing. That sucks.
Yeah, it's not great testing. It's expensive. So and there's not any requirement to test the product on a certain number of skin tones. It can vary to extreme amounts. There was one study that showed that SPF tested at 3 different labs accounted for a 20% variation in the SPF rating. And
that's huge.
Some up to 50%.
What? I could not. Okay, if me and you both bought the same sunscreen, an American sunscreen, and we went out to the pool and we used the same amount for the same amount of time, we have a relatively similar complexion, I think. You're telling me that there is up to a 50% chance, or I could burn up to 50% more or less just because I have a different bottle of sunscreen.
The stuff between batches, this is saying the same batch of sunscreen.
The same batch?
This is saying 3 different labs were given the same sunscreen to test the SPF rating of, and it is so subjective that it varied, accounted for 20% variation and up to 50% in one of the labs.
Shoot, I'm gonna open up a sunscreen testing lab too. It's $5,000 to $10,000, and I will just look at it and go, "Yeah, that looks like sunscreen to me."
Well,
because that's about what they're doing.
And the thing is, like, there is a scale for skin tone stuff in dermatology. So even between you and I have a different type than you.
That is
primarily because being part Latina. They could just test it on my skin. I won't get a minimal erythema dose as quickly. And they're not required to do it on the whole sort of rainbow of skin tones, which therein lies the issue, because I'm not going to burn as easily.
Yeah, because I'm made of raw bacon, and I will just fry under any amount of sun. Yeah, just sizzle. And all of that olive oil I slather all over myself does not help.
Delicious. But yeah, things in very extreme amounts. Anything from the pressure with which the researcher spreads the sunscreen on a person can affect the end result.
Wow. That's wild. I wonder, there's got to be a better way.
That's what I'm about to get into.
There's got to be a better way.
There's got to be a better way. So
Robots.
So I'm not joking. Actually, kind of, yes.
Oh, shit. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So non-human tests could be the future for sunscreen. So I don't know how much you know about types of research, but there's in vitro, in vivo, and a very exciting one that I will tell you about in a second called in silico. In vivo is how we're doing it, which is in an actual person. In vitro is in a petri dish, essentially, not on a person, in some sort of approximation of how it would act on a person. And in vitro is the most logical, easiest sort of way to go next. Not testing it on a person, but testing it on something that would react similarly. The main hurdle to in vitro SPF testing is that it would be extremely difficult to make a substance for testing that mimics human skin well enough to be accurate. Human skin is not just this one smooth surface. It's got these pockets, it's got dimension.
Right. Layers.
layers like an onion. Layers like an onion. But therein lies the problem. And skin has different types of skin and different areas of the body. And that's the biggest hurdle. That's the biggest hurdle right now. But still, if an in vitro method could at least meet the stellar standards of our current shitty method, it could make things a lot easier and a lot more ethical, because I think it's pretty fucking unethical to expose human beings to a known carcinogen in damaging amounts.
Presumably for money.
Yeah, and I have no idea. So most of my info about this, I will put a link to it. I got from a video by one of my favorite dermatologists to watch on YouTube, Dr.Dray. I love her because she also links to all of her studies she's referenced in her video description, so I can go nerd out further about it, but I will link to that. Some of her stuff where she gets a little out of her lane as a dermatologist can be a little triggering food-wise, so I recommend you stick to these skincare ones. But anyway, so in silico testing is in a computer where they test things.
Robots.
Yes, this is the option that is most exciting to me. A computer model could find an SPF rating using the ingredients present in the sunscreen, which would account for the inactive ingredients.
That is super interesting.
So far, it seems fairly accurate. It's still in the beginning stages of figuring it out, but it's been fairly reproducible. So that could very likely be the future of sunscreen testing.
That's really interesting.
No method will ever be perfect, but I feel like we already have the technology necessary to do better than we're currently doing, and it just seems like there's little incentive to.
Yeah, it's really, I would be curious also to see what kind of testing that they do overseas in comparison. That Korean sunscreen that we use that's really, really nice. I'm curious as to how exactly that was tested.
So they do also do testing on humans, and there has been some issues, especially with racism inherent in testing sunscreens and Korean sunscreens also. So testing is not perfect anywhere by any means, but because they don't have to regulate theirs like a drug, it's a lot easier to get better, more modern filters.
Yeah, the only place where the testing is perfect is right here at my house. $5,000, any sunscreen. I'll test it. Give me 20 minutes. I'll tell you how great it tastes.
Delicious.
Delicious. Yeah, this is delicious. Tastes like SPF 40. Let's go with a 40 on that one. That's what we need to do. We just need to train somebody who likes eating sunscreen to detect the SPF.
It's you when I give you a smooch after I've applied my sunscreen.
Accurate. I love you so much, and it's totally fine, but accurate.
And you're like, sunscreen lips. I'm sorry. My lips need sunscreen too.
It's true.
But anyway, so sunscreen basics. Even though testing is not good and it's hard to find, there is still overwhelming evidence that wearing sunscreen regularly every single day prevents skin cancer and prevents premature skin aging. And when I say premature skin aging, this isn't just a cosmetic thing. My big incentive is A, preventing skin cancer, but B, premature skin aging includes thinning of the skin. So that's when you get that old person who just walks by something sharp and ends up slicing their fucking leg open, needing stitches, not having good wound healing, that thin skin. So we are all going to age. The other option is dying, and I'm going to try to delay that as long as possible, But also, your skin is an organ. I don't want any of my organs to age prematurely. Yeah. So it's about keeping your skin healthy and functioning to make your life easier in that regard as long as possible. Whatever you do now is going to make things easier when you're older because you're not worried about constantly slicing your skin open, having wounds that aren't healing. Just keep that shit healthy as long as possible. And that's one of the things sunscreen does.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? That's how that goes?
Yeah, so I always get that fucked up because I was in Steel Magnolias as a teenager. And I remember most of my lines, but there was one line going where I had to say, well, an ounce of pretension is worth a pound of manure. And my brain wants to say that instead, but yes.
I almost like that better. Anyway.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I for anyone curious, I was a 16-year-old playing Weezer, in, not Weezer the band, Violet, please don't get excited.
Sorry.
But anyway, sunscreen basics. You should be wearing one. Even inside, there is a picture that I will attach to the Patreon notes, because I have my color-coded notes for Patreon subscribers, where it shows a truck driver who half of his face was to the window, and not the other half was not to the walls.
You can bet there was sweat dripping down. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I can't say to the window. Half of his face was exposed to the window side of the truck, and half of his face was to the interior of the truck. And it shows, like, 20-something years of truck driving that half of his face looks 20 years older than the other half, because those UVA rays were coming through the window on that side and beating down really hard. So inside is important. It's also just getting in the habit of wearing it every day, because how often are you like, I'm going to be inside all day. Oh, wait, fuck, I have to go to the post office. Like, and you end up running out and doing that. And, like, if you're in the habit of doing it every day anyway, it's just easier. What sunscreen do you use? So there are two different sort of categories of sunscreen. There is mineral, which is sometimes called physical, versus chemical. So physical sunscreens are made with two different ingredients, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. The amounts of that the SPF, you may say, well, this one has a higher percentage of this, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean it has better SPF. So don't stress about that. But these two ingredients create a thin film on your skin that sits on top of the skin, and it absorbs and to a certain degree refracts physically the UVA and UVB rays to keep them from penetrating your skin. And when it absorbs them, those UVA rays are turned into basically heat. The benefits of a physical sunscreen or a mineral sunscreen are that they are reef safe. Many chemical sunscreens have, their effects on coral, and mineral sunscreens are generally good for people with sensitive skin. So, I have eczema and rosacea and acne, and I have to be very particular about the chemical sunscreens I use, because a lot of them really irritate me. Like, I tried a new sunscreen, and Violet can vouch, I had an eczema flare-up on my neck because my skin did not like the new chemical sunscreen. My Chemical Sunscreen.
My Chemical Sunscreen. Our new band, My Chemical Sunscreen.
But anyway, it's good for sensitive skin. It's less irritating. It's generally less irritating around the eyes, too. So, chemical sunscreens tend to burn my eyes a lot, but mineral sunscreens do not. Now, the negatives, where we get into some of the racism that occurs in sunscreen, is that there is not a great selection for BIPOC folks, because every mineral sunscreen will leave some sort of a cast on your skin, because they are creating a thin film and a physical layer of protection. So mineral sunscreens have to have pigments added to prevent folks from looking like an old Victorian ghost. But even with the added pigments, it's often really hard to find one that matches well, doesn't transfer onto your clothing. They're generally pretty thick and harder to blend. And sunscreen, the best sunscreen is the one you'll wear, and it's really, really hard to want to wear it when it is giving you a weird cast, when it's too thick. And I was trying to think of a mineral body sunscreen I know of that actually has pigments added to it to not make people look like a ghost. And I can't think of a body one that has had pigments added for folks with darker skin tones.
That's wild.
They make face ones, but I can't think of a single body one I know of that is actually made for different skin tones. I can't imagine how hard it is, because even with my skin tone, it is hard for me to find a mineral sunscreen that doesn't make me look like I'm sick. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And
so
the few times I've used mineral sunscreen, the few times I've used mineral sunscreen, I usually, when I go for foundation, I go for the porcelain. I'm very, very pale. Even for me, the few times I've used mineral sunscreen, it's like, oh wow, I look like a ghost still.
Yeah, there's just that mineral one that I got you that has a pretty good tint, which I will have.
Yeah,
I'll have a list. I'll have a list of my favorite sunscreens for the Patreon subscribers with links and stuff. Because no joke, I have an old medicine cabinet I painted that's on my wall that is full of my skincare stuff. That's my grease cupboard. But anyway, the cream zone. So the other kind of sunscreens are chemical sunscreens, and they utilize chemical filters to strategically filter out the amount of UVA and UVB along different wavelengths, which some of them can really sort of narrow down and make sure they're getting all kinds of wavelengths of UVA and UVB that can penetrate the skin. And they also absorb it and translate that into just sort of radiant heat that gets filtered off. So the benefits, they're usually a lot lighter and easier to wear. They can provide broad spectrum coverage, and broad spectrum just means UVA to UVB. They don't usually leave a cast, so they're better for darker skin tones. And they're just much more cosmetically elegant for darker skin tones. So that's why I say it's hard when you have to think about reef safety, but also there's no body sunscreen that is made for someone with your skin tone, and you can't wear the chemical sunscreens. That's why people who are like, you shouldn't use chemical sunscreens, and it's like, babe, it's not that easy. It's not that easy, because I wouldn't want to walk around looking like a ghost.
Absolutely.
So the negative, many filters get absorbed into the skin, which I already said. We have no evidence about how harmful this is, if it's harmful at all. And the biggest issue is that in the United States, our chemical filters are just okay. Like, they work, and I still use a few American sunscreens. Like, I put one on my bod today. But other countries just have the good shit. But for filters available in the US, many can also be irritating to eyes and to sensitive skin. I know which ones work for me, but if you have sensitive skin, it may take you a little bit to find a chemical one that doesn't irritate you as much. So those are your two categories of sunscreen. I use some combo of physical mineral ones and chemical ones on a day-to-day basis, depending on what I'm going to be doing that day. So for application, for your face, dermatologists generally recommend 1/4 of a teaspoon, but I'm not going to be pulling out measuring spoons every morning. So that's where the old 2-finger method comes in. So it's generally good. Yeah, it's generally good to do 2 to 3 finger lengths, which is enough for the neck and chest as well. Because there's an actual dermatological condition of skin damage that is for people who have been putting sunscreen on their face and stuff, but ignoring their neck and chest, where it creates a funny triangle. It creates a triangle of less skin damage, like on the neck and top of the chest. And then the rest is damaged. So make sure you get the titties too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, it's usually 3 finger lengths, and because the sides of my head are shaved, I also take care of that. But anyway, 2 to 3 finger lengths for face, neck, chest. For your body, the recommended amount is a shot glass for all areas of exposed skin.
A shot glass full?
Yes.
My God, that seems like so much.
It's really not when you're covering your whole bod.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and also, like, I feel like that amount, that seemed like for a whole body, right? People vary so much in size.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. And that's why it's just a sort of cursory recommendation.
Yeah, that's true.
If you are not at least hitting the shot glass level, you should consider applying more.
Okay, that's true.
So reapplication. If you're spending most of your day outside, reapplication every 2 hours is really important, because the sunscreen ingredients start to break down after exposure to the sun, because they're absorbing those rays. Some of them are going to break down. If you're swimming, you should be reapplying it every hour. If you're spending most of your day indoors, reapplication really isn't as important. But reapplication, the purpose is less about it degrading in quality and really about making sure you applied enough initially in the first place. Because it's hard to make sure you didn't miss spots and have spots that are kind of patchy on your first go.
That's
and studies repeatedly show people don't fucking apply enough sunscreen. So reapplication is mostly important for that reason. But if I'm going to be inside all day and I'm just taking the dogs out here and there, I'm just applying it once.
That's fair.
So this is the part of who should wear sunscreen. Fucking everyone. Everyone should wear sunscreen. I feel really strongly about this because I am extremely white, but I come from a mixed ethnicity household, and a lot of my family were under the impression that because their skin was brown, they did not need sunscreen. But every single older adult on the Puerto Rican side of my family has had skin cancer removed.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a coincidence.
Yeah. And it's not entirely their fault, though, because in sunscreen commercials, you are not seeing it applied most of the time to anybody except white people.
Yeah,
it's not made to be important. And because they're not burning, I was allergic to some earlier, like 90s sunscreen ingredients I was just allergic to, and my mom didn't know about, mineral sunscreen, didn't want me looking like a ghost, so didn't apply it. But I didn't burn easily. So even though I'm extremely wet, I wasn't burning easily, probably because of genetics, so she thought I was fine. So I put myself, unknowingly, because I was a kid, at much higher risk of getting skin cancer later in my life, because my family thought I wasn't burning. It's fine. Did not, I don't know why, make the connection that people were having skin cancers removed. Older cousins I have all have had multiple skin cancers removed because it just wasn't made to be important. So everyone should be wearing sunscreen.
Yeah, and
regardless
even
of
my
skin
family,
tone.
my family is about as white as they come. And when I was growing up, when I was very, very young, my parents were always like, sunscreen every hour, we're going to do it. But once I got to be like 10 or 11, and I was like, yeah, I want to go swim, put on whatever, sunscreen, blah, 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 blah. And it just sort of went downhill from there. And I think it was like around, I was like, by the time I was 13 or 14 in the summer, I was like, I don't want to bother with sunscreen. I want to go swimming now. I don't like how this stuff smells. It's gross. It makes my body feel weird. And my mom was basically just like, well, you're going to get sunburned, right? And I was like, yeah. I didn't understand as a kid what that meant or could mean later on in my life. I really shouldn't have been allowed to make that decision. I should have been told, no, you need to wear sunscreen. You don't want to get cancer later on down the road. I should not have been in the position to decide whether or not I get to wear sunscreen. So, yeah, everyone should wear sunscreen.
Yeah, everyone should. Darker skin is more protected from UVB, but UVA can also still affect and contribute to cancerous growth, regardless of how dark your skin is. Windows only filter out UVB, so you're still exposed regardless. And there is systemic racism at play in both dermatology and cosmetics that will lead BIPOC folks, like a good chunk of my family, to believe they don't need sunscreen, which is simply not true. Even though the prevalence of melanoma is less common in Black folks are more likely to be diagnosed with later stage melanoma when they develop it. And they only have a survival rate of around 69%. In contrast, white folks who are diagnosed with melanoma have a survival rate of 94%.
God, that sucks.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't suck for the white people. It sucks for the people that aren't white.
It shouldn't be that way. And dermatologists often don't know to look for it in the places that it shows up on people with darker skin tone. So it's going to show up different places, like fingernail beds, the palms of your hands, stuff like that. Exactly. When they're trained to look at places,
you can get skin cancer in your fingernail bed?
Yes.
I hate that. I just have to say I hate that.
Yeah, there's skin. That's skin,
I hate that.
baby. You can get that. You can get it on your lips. You can get it behind your ears.
Oh.
That's why I'm slathering that shit up. A study in 2012 found that 50% of dermatologists said they felt they received inadequate training on recognizing skin conditions on Black folks, making it harder for serious conditions to get recognized and addressed early on.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, it's medical racism. And it makes it extremely hard when it is a branch of medicine that is specifically for skin, and the people who are supposed to know about all kinds of skin are not learning about an enormous chunk of people because of the skin tone they have. So yeah, everyone should wear sunscreen. Everyone should wear sunscreen. It's important. Skin cancer is obviously a reason, because it's okay, well, why am I wearing sunscreen? Well, one, prevent skin cancer, duh. That's the most obvious, and I don't feel like I really need to extrapolate on that further, but it's cancer prevention. This is the largest organ on your body, other than your dong, maybe.
So I actually have a question. I recently was listening to the podcast Sawbones. We're both big fans of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a listener question at one point where somebody said, I have a friend who doesn't believe that being out in the sun all day causes skin cancer. And their argument was that people before sunscreen was invented were out in the sun all day and didn't get didn't get skin cancer. And I'm fairly certain I know the answer to this. But what would be your rebuttal to that?
Because there are ways other than SPF to protect yourself from the sun, which people have been doing for ages. Like we even saw with the olive oil and stuff. Even if it's not something applied to your skin directly, types of clothing. And then culturally, there's certain times of day when the UV index is more intense. And in a lot of these cultures, even so today, those times when the UV index is more intense tend to be times where you are inside more.
That makes sense, yeah. And also, the people
deliberately inside more.
The people in olden times that got skin cancer real bad, they died. They just
Yeah,
died.
also people died a lot easier. But yeah, there's so many, and that was one of the early issues with sunscreen, is that people would get so cocky thinking that this is the thing that's going to protect me from the sun, and then
Mm.
they would take no other
Oh
precautions
my
against the
gosh.
sun,
Yeah, that whole
and they would
paradox, I
get
forget what it's
burnt.
called.
Yeah, so I know we've all probably experienced it where it's like, I'm fine, I can be out longer, and you are not fine. You got a sunburn.
Yeah, 4 hours at the pool later.
Yeah, no, the worst burns I gotten were I went snorkeling and I got it on my back because I was like, "Oh, cool. I saw a shark. I'm excited. I'm an autistic bitch in the ocean. I'm fucking vibing. I love it. I'm close to all of
Title of
the
my next
animals."
album.
Yeah, yeah. And I got distracted and got horribly sunburnt because my back was
Yeah.
just up all day.
Ironically, same. Worst sunburn I ever had for me was I went on a cruise. My family, when I was younger, went on a cruise, and we all went down to the Bahamas. And there was a beach out there. There was just no shade of any kind anywhere. And I was like, well, I did bring sunscreen, and I slathered it on every hour, and I was the only one of my family to do so. And somehow, I still got the worst burn of everyone.
Yeah. Oh, but from then on, instead of just relying on sunscreen, I like to always have a rash guard that I wear when I'm going to be doing stuff in the ocean.
What is a rash guard?
A rash guard is a piece of like swimming sort of clothing that is often worn by surfers and stuff, but it's the little zip up
Oh.
thing that's usually long sleeve,
Oh, kind of like a wetsuit.
like the top half of a wetsuit, pretty much. It can be a vest.
Oh,
It
I
can
see. I see. Okay, got
Yeah,
you.
it can be long sleeve, it can be just like a vest, it can be short sleeve, but that is another way you're keeping the sun from hurting you. So, anyway, the rebuttal to that
That's
is
cool.
that
I didn't know about that.
yeah, there are so many ways to help protect yourself from the sun that are not sunscreen. But sunscreen is something you should also do.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, what are the other
Well,
reasons?
thank you.
What are the other reasons to wear sunscreen? Like I had said, prevent premature aging of the skin. And that is a quality of life thing for later in life. Sure, the vanity of not being wrinkled and looking like an alligator handbag is nice, but it is one of your organs, and you should try to be aging in a healthy way and not, prematurely aging yourself by doing things that are carcinogenic to you.
Yeah.
It chews up the collagen in your skin. Your skin gets thinner. It leads to all sorts of problems. There are other ways, like, I know for a lot of people, vanity is the way to get them to wear sunscreen, which it's like, hey, if that's what does it, that's what does it. It is the best form of wrinkle protection you can do. It will
Oh, yeah.
It will also prevent solar lenticos, which are the technical term for sunspots or liver spots.
Oh.
Liver spots
I
don't
thought
have
it was
anything.
some kind of cryptid.
Liver spots have nothing to do with your liver. They are sun damage.
Why do they call them liver spots?
I have no idea. I have not actually looked in the history of that. They'll prevent sunscrotes.
Sunscrotes.
They do
Hate
prevent.
when I get a sunscrote.
Hey, but they do prevent your face from getting a scrote-like texture prematurely.
Oh, yeah.
They prevent crepey skin, prevent hyperpigmentation. That was a big thing for me because sunscreen was the way that I had cystic acne from the time I was 8 years old, and I should have a lot worse acne scars than I do, but when I started really taking my skin seriously as a teenager, I am very fortunate that I do not have all that hyperpigmentation. If you have things like rosacea, if you have acne, if you have any sort of skin condition that can lead to, those spots that go away even after the acne's gone, sunscreen will help keep those from becoming permanent. It'll help protect those while they're healing because the UV radiation helps keep it there, which I should do another episode about hyperpigmentation.
Hell yeah.
Which is especially important if you have darker skin tones because trauma to darker skin tones tends to lead to hyperpigmentation more easily. And sunscreen is a way to prevent that. And if you're spending money on active ingredients elsewhere in your skincare routine, like if you're using a retinol, if you're using AHAs and BHAs, if you're spending money on fancy skincare stuff and you're not wearing sunscreen, you are just burning money. Any good that it does your skin is going to be undone by damage from the sun.
Yeah.
If you have any sort of skin condition that is inflammatory, sunscreen can help. Yeah, wear your fucking sunscreen, and
Wear
I will
your
have
goddamn sunscreen.
wear your goddamn sunscreen. I will have my color coded notes on the Mixnomer Patreon, which includes all of my sources and links to the articles, link to that. I'll include the link to the Dr.Dray video in just in the regular show notes. And I'll also have a list of some of my favorite sunscreens.
Hell yeah.
Because I love sunscreen so much.
I mean, Rita Repulsa had to be wearing a sunscreen. You see how good she looked after 1,200 years?
But she was underground though, right? Didn't she come up from underground?
Yeah, okay, but the UVB rays,
they're not going to make it underground.
But they go through windows, and maybe she had a window, and there was okay. Well, the best that's it. The best sunscreen is just stay in a hole underground, a cold, dark hole.
I love that.
That's what I'm gonna
do that anyway. Yeah.
But
anyway, that's my dump. Wear your sunscreen.
Hell yeah! Thanks for taking a dump.
Thanks.
I hope it all came out well.
It's liquidy like sunscreen. I'm worried.
Okay, well, 2 fingers. That's the important part.
Hey, I'm back with the housekeeping stuff. So you can check out the episode details to find mine and Violet's social media handles. You can find Mixnomer itself, the production company for our shows, on Blue Sky now, thanks to a very kind friend in our Patreon Discord, Fantago, who gave us an invite code. So I will be posting about new episodes of Infodumpies on there as I kind of figure out Blue Sky. And if you want to support us but you can't do so on Patreon, tell a friend about the show. We don't pay for ads on any stuff we do. We purely go on word of mouth from y'all, so the more you share about us on social media, tell an individual friend about it if you think they're into it, the more we can grow our show, and that actively helps us. Another way you can help us out is leave a cute little review for us. If your podcast app supports reviews and ratings, leaving us a cute little review and or rating would be great. If you're not subscribed to the show, that also helps us. It helps us get found in rankings and stuff better and suggested to more people, so go ahead and subscribe. If you would like to support us by joining our Patreon for Mixnomer, you get bonus content for basically everything that our production company of little nerds are going to do. We do profit sharing, so everyone basically makes the same hourly rate, and it's split based on how much time we spend working on stuff. And yeah, that helps support us. Like right now, thanks to members of the Patreon, I'm looking at upgrades for recording equipment for the cast of our other show, Today's Lucky Winner. All because you kind people have helped pay for making stuff. I'm feeling very mushy and appreciative about that. But when you support us on Patreon, you can also get a cool shout out at certain levels, like our friends Randy Lovings, Rachel Rachelson, Sewing Seraph, B. Trossler, Kelly Brennan, Smriti Singh, Helen Clifford, M. Mosen, Lutzi, and Fleetwood Mac Sexpants. Yeah, if you also are looking for some support and you're a newly recognized AuDHDer, you can find the link to my website where I offer peer support and coaching in the show notes. So, all right, I'll see you next time, and make sure you're wearing your fucking SPF. After all of that, wear your fucking sunscreen.